Welcome back to Shannons Club TV, the program for all motoring enthusiasts to relive classic Australian road and race memories. Join us as we look back on the defining points of our feature car and take a road trip with a proud enthusiast.
And if you're in the market for a classic car, we'll also get the latest advice from the Shannons auctions team. So let's get things rolling with the luxurious British sedan, which set a new benchmark in affordable, high-performance motoring. The Jaguar MK2.
The Jaguar MK2 is one of those updated models that completely overshadowed the original. When it made its debut at the 1955 London Motor Show, the model we now call the Mark I was simply the Jaguar 2.4 litre. 2 years later, the 3.4 was added to make a two-car range. But these cars had poor rear vision and an absurdly narrow rear track. With the reworked Mark II in 1959, buyers could choose between three versions of the twin overhead camshaft Jaguar 6, the engine responsible for 5 Le Mans victories in the 1950s. The interior lost its claustrophobic feel and that vintage-style four-spoke steering wheel. With its all-new glass house and dashboard, wider footprint and all-round disc brakes, the Mark II was both practical and beautiful. Many facelifts are superficial, but this one was a cracker and it maximised the potential of the compact Jaguar. Mark, the so-called Mark I had its share of motor racing successes, but the Mark II really set a higher standard, didn't it?
Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, you've got to keep in mind the Mark I in 3.4 litre form was a very successful race car in its own right, both in the UK and in Australia with guys like David Mackay, Bill Pitt and of course Pete Gagan. Now when the Mark II came along, it was actually heavier than the Mark I, but the massive improvements they made in terms of engine and suspension made that car virtually unbeatable here in the early 1960s, which I'll get to a bit later on.
The Mark II 3.8 set a new standard for high-performance sedans, and a manual version with overdrive was as quick as the Falcon XR GT. In 1959, the 3.8 version simply had no direct rival, with its top speed of at least 120 miles per hour. Not only that, but it was beautifully styled and luxurious in the Jaguar walnut and leather tradition. At the other end of the spectrum, the Mark II 2.4 automatic I owned was not really a performance sedan, with its true top speed of 97 and slow initial acceleration. But hey, it shared the charisma of the 3.8. This was brilliant marketing by Jaguar, and even the 2.4 is now highly collectible. So good was the Mark II that Jaguar had enormous trouble creating a true successor for it. And while the S-Type and 420 models with their bigger boots and independent rear suspension were superior cars, collectors have never taken to them in the same way. Mark, we really saw the true potential of the Mark II when Bob Jane started racing one.
Yeah, we sure did. And it made headlines not only here, but around the world. Bob Jane's legendary Jaguar Mark II ranks as one of the all-time greats of Aussie touring car racing. In fact, at the height of its fame in the early 1960s, the UK's Motorsport magazine called it simply the fastest Jaguar saloon in the world. It won back-to-back Australian Touring Car Championships and, according to former Chief Mechanic John Sawyer, won a total of 70 races and set new lap records at every circuit. Jane, Sawyer and Harry Firth stretched the Mark II's performance potential to the limit by removing excess weight and optimising suspension tuning. The 3.8 litre dual overhead cam 6 was also bought out to 4.1 litres, which, along with triple Weber carburetors, special Repco pistons, a large baffled sump and numerous other tweaks, resulted in more than 300 brake horsepower and a scintillating top speed of 151 mph on the old Conrod Straight at Bathurst. John, the highest speed recorded by a Phase 3 GTHO Falcon down Conrod Straight in the Bathurst 500 a decade later was 154 mph, or about 246 k's. So Think of Jane going down there at 151 mile an hour a decade before in a car with a much smaller engine capacity. I mean, boy, that puts it in perspective, doesn't it?
It makes you look at it a whole different way, really, when you think it was a car in many ways, the potential of which was way ahead of its time.
What a rocket, though. And
Fantastic.
I remember David Mackay talking about driving the Mark 1 down Conrod and going at these incredibly high speeds. The eerie silence of that car, it was aerodynamically so good that it just had virtually no drag.
And which one would you rather have to brake at the end of Conrod Straight?
That's exactly another adventure altogether. The Jane Jaguar's longevity as Australia's touring car benchmark was remarkable, given that it downed many strong challenges over 5 seasons, including Norm Beechey's big block Chevy Impala and EHS4, Len Lukey's Ford Galaxy, Ern Abbott's hot R-Series Valiant, Jim McEwen's Lotus Cortina, and many more. Jane's first ATCC win came at Adelaide's Mallala Raceway in 1962, at a time when Australia's most prestigious sedan title was decided by a single race. He claimed his second national crown the following year, with a dominant performance at Longford in Tasmania. And if not for a slipping clutch in the closing stages of the 1964 clash at Lakeside in Queensland, the mighty Mark II was on course to win 3 titles in a row. Inevitably, the reign of Jane's Jaguar came to an end in 1965, after new rules outlawed key modifications and Norm Beechey started to clean up with a new V8 Ford Mustang. Jane was left with no choice but to follow suit, but his juggernaut Jaguar would leave an unforgettable legacy. You can read many other great road and race stories on the Shannons Club website.
I'm Tony Robinson and I've owned this car for 8 years. It is a 1961 November build Mark II Jaguar with wide wheels. Factory delivered to Bryson's in Sydney in 1961. The motor was developed during the Second World War with 3.8 engine, 4-speed transmission with overdrive, which makes it a 5-speed transmission. It's got a cross-flow head, a hemispherical combustion chamber, and that was a high-performance engine producing approximately 210 brake horsepower, and that was phenomenal horsepower for the day. The car was so popular because of its high performance that bank robbers used to use it as their car of choice. So it's certainly had a renowned history. I have a passion for bringing cars back that are really at their death knell. The car was just a shell when I found it, just the body. All the mechanicals have been removed and they were in boxes. There was a few parts missing after 35 years, you can imagine, and so what I did is I bought another Mark II Jaguar as a donor car, and then it was a 2-year rebuild project. Been insured with Shannons for 30 years now, and I've got 5 cars insured with them, and they're just a great company to deal with. Shannons have been fantastic. It's a lovely car on the open road. It's a really good high-speed cruiser. It's very stable on the road and it handles the corners quite well. I really enjoyed seeing my grandson learn to drive on this car.
Shannons National Auctions Manager Chris Borobin joins us to chat about the collectability of the Jaguar Mark II. Welcome, Chris.
Hello, John.
Welcome to the show, mate.
Thanks, mate.
The Jaguar Mark II, it always seems to be very active in the collectible market and a strong demand. Is that demand increasing?
Yeah, it's always been a popular car. The Mark II has always had a great appeal, and it's not only from, I find it's got an appeal across varied age brackets.
Oh, okay. Right.
Yeah, and it's, we've had quite a number through at auction, and we're still getting quite a number coming through at auction, and the prices just seem to increase every year.
So, Chris, why do you think the Mark II has maintained that level of popularity across different generations?
It's quite an attractive vehicle. It's pretty to look at. It's got some great options. You've got the combination of a woodwork, the leather trim, the wire wheels,
Beautiful,
which is a desired option on those cars. And with the larger 3.4 or 3.8 engines, they've really proved that they've stood the test of times, I guess. And it's a car that can keep up with today's traffic as well. So that's quite important.
True, yeah.
Yep.
In 1978, I owned a Mark II, but it was the 2.4 auto, and it was worth only a fraction of what a 3.8 was worth. Is it still the same now, or are they creeping up?
That's right.
As well?
Look, I think the pegging order really, the 3.8 manual is the most sought after.
With overdrive and wire wheels.
Exactly right.
Yeah, but then you've got the 2.4, you've got the 3.4, and of course you've got that beautiful little the Daimler, the 2.5 litre
2.5
V8.
litre V8.
Do you see many of those? Because that's a really sweet little car, isn't it?
Yes. Again, we see a fair number of the 2.5 litre V8s come through, and the 250 V8 variant as well.
Would that sit between the 2.4 and the 3.4 in collectability?
I think it probably sits around a 3.4 value. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
And we've also seen a lot of modifications going on with Jaguar Mark IIs, particularly updating them technically. So you still get that lovely classic feel, but the car performs like a modern car. Is that considered acceptable now in terms of collectability?
It is, and we're seeing a lot of specialists here in Australia who are carrying some amazing builds of Mark IIs and putting later running gear, whether it's from your 90s saloons or whether they're the 6-cylinder variants or the V12 variants we've seen being put into the Mark II bodies.
Like the English Coombs cars,
That's
for
correct,
example.
Yep. And that's been popular at Coombs editions, with the spats, the vented bonnets, that's going very popular.
That wouldn't hurt the value at all, I wouldn't think.
No, it
I'd
doesn't.
have one of those.
Yeah.
So if you're in the market for a Mark II, is that still the 3.8 manual wire wheels? That sort of car is still the most desirable?
I think, if you can find a 3.8 variant with a manual gearbox, all the options, your power steering, your air conditioning and everything, wire wheels, that really is probably the most sought after variant.
Yeah.
And look, they're commanding, extremely good money today.
Good stuff.
Yeah, well, thanks for joining us, Chris.
No problem, thank you.
And remember, you can find all the latest auction results on the Shannons Club website. If you'd like your own image of the Jaguar Mark II in competition, visit AutoPic's incredible motorsport photo archive.
John, it's interesting looking back at the Mark II. We always talk about Jaguars being exceptional value for money, and they always were. But I mean, the Mark II really epitomised that, didn't it?
Well, if you look at cars like the Mercedes-Benz 220 SE, that particular car had a 2.1, 2.2 litre fuel-injected engine, but no leather, and not nearly the plush feel of the Jaguar Mark II, and certainly not as much performance, but cost more money. So that just about sums up the Jaguar's place in the market. It was exceptional. We hope you've enjoyed this look back at the charismatic Jaguar Mark II, and we'll catch you next time on Shannons Club TV.